Welcome to the first episode in a Legendarium series about ancient Ireland. In part 1, the Megalith Builders, we will talk about the first societies of Ireland, including Mesolithic hunter-gatherers and late Neolithic farmers. The end of the Ice Age allowed for the settlement of Ireland and the British Isles. Ireland was one of the last places on Earth to be settled by human beings, who had arrived in remote Australia 40,000 years before the first people came to Ireland around 9000 BC. These first arrivals arrived at Coleraine on the coast of Ireland about 2,000 years after the retreat of the ice sheets. These early people lived as hunter-gatherers and built villages of wooden huts with domed roofs made from bark and animal skins. Such huts served as communal lodges for extended families, with a single basin-shaped fire pit in the center and a round opening in the roof for the ventilation of smoke. Most of these Mesolithic communities lived near the coast, migrating from one place to another depending on the availability of food, and only rarely venturing into the island's heavily wooded interior. Using flint, these Mesolithic peoples made axes, scrapers, knives, harpoon blades, and arrowheads. In years to come, the early Irish increasingly turned to agriculture during the Neolithic, when stable climate and better tools made it possible to bring vast tracts of land under cultivation. Irish agriculture likely began with the coming of farming immigrants who hailed from modern-day Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. They brought with them farming techniques that would transform the island. In Western Ireland, a cattle culture took root. These early farmers required vast tracts of open land, which they used to graze their cows. They laid out miles upon miles of stone fences intended to pasture cattle. These farmers separated their herds into breeding stock, milk cows, and calves with their mothers. When they cleared the dense upland forests, these ancient Irish left vast peat bogs that now cover 1/6 of Ireland. To this day, Irish farmers dig pog beet for fuel. Social hierarchies emerged as these Neolithic farming societies developed, with wealthy farmers wearing elaborate collars and amber jewelry imported from the Baltic coast to show their status. Kings wore their hair in a distinctive fashion, with the front of their foreheads shaved and the rest of their hair bundled up like a mohawk. To hold it in place, they used resin imported from the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain. The luxuries of these early kings show that Ireland had trade connections to the wider world. Death and ancestry became central to how people stamped their identity upon the land and made it truly theirs. Across the British Isles, Neolithic farmers honored the dead by removing their flesh and eating the best bits. To dispose of the rest, they displayed the dead in prominent locations for scavenging dogs and birds to eat, likely recovering the bones for burial in the land that their ancestors gave their lives to cultivate. 3,000 years before Christ, a new wave of migrants brought world-changing technology to the British Isles. They came as prospectors looking for tin and copper, which they smelted into bronze, a metal that was far harder than flint could ever be. Indeed, the fires that they used for smelting turned green, which would have appeared as magic to the eyes of the uninitiated. Now people could make not just better tools, but armor and weapons. These late Neolithic and early Bronze Age communities built stone monuments housing the bones of their revered ancestors, believed to have totemic powers that protected their descendants and their land. The British Isles, Scandinavia, Spain, and even Greece are dotted with such constructions called megaliths. In Ireland, people built a vast necropolis called Newgrange. This complex included bones arranged in decorative patterns, surrounded by standing stones that tracked the rising and setting of the sun through the seasons, much like Stonehenge in England. Irish farmers built it around 3200 BC. 500 years before the pyramids, and 1,000 years before Stonehenge. It is 250 feet across, 39 feet high, and it covers an acre of ground. The entrance of Newgrange leads to a 62-foot-long passage that opens to a central chamber housing bone-filled recesses. A wide range of supporting resources would have been needed to build this monument. Timber rollers would have been required to move the huge stones, hemp ropes to hold them in place, and boats to float the stones from their source. We do not have the names of the tribes which settled in this early Ireland. We only have artifacts like the bronze collars, which were based on continental models made by the Celts in modern-day France. Yet another reminder of early Ireland's international connections. Additionally, we know that these early Irish performed ritual killings, perhaps human sacrifice. Cloney Cavan Man, killed around 300 BC, was sacrificed to an earth goddess by being strangled, his face smashed in with an axe, and then disemboweled. The earth goddess, whom his subjects worships, is said to have 3 different aspects, and so the 3 methods of killing would have appeased all 3 aspects of the goddess. In short, ancient Ireland was a highly developed and sophisticated society with international connections, yet it was also capable of barbaric acts, much like their counterparts in England, Scotland, and Wales. That wraps things up for this episode of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.